here in Jacksonville, it was brought to my attention the other night that Alex Rosen, you might know him from I Fight for Kids, him and his team, they basically set up like sting-like operations, and they catch usually men, but adults trying to interact with children inappropriately. You follow my drift? And so he was here in Jacksonville, caught a man trying to meet a child. They called JSO. JSO came out. The man showed JSO inappropriate content from his phone. And when I say inappropriate, you know what I'm talking about. And they let him go. Now, there was a big stink about this. The man has since been arrested. Now, I would like to point one thing out here real quick. Alex, you know we like to be very objective on this show. So Alex, he pointed out that Donna Deegan, our mayor, had blocked him on social media. And he was making a big stink about it. And I was like, wait a minute, what? She blocked him? Well, Donna Deegan has two accounts. And the account that she blocked him from was the one that says at Donna Deegan. But if you notice down here, kind of toward the end of her profile description, it says Mayor Deegan, at Mayor Deegan, for official updates. So in the interest of being objective, and I don't watch this particular account very closely, but I will say it is my understanding that if a public official has two accounts, or if they have a personal account and they do not use that to communicate official public policy or official business from the seat that they hold, then they can indeed block you from it. So it's possible, and I don't review this account, so I don't know for sure if she doesn't use it for that purpose or if she does. Okay? So just know, folks out there, that yes, a public official, they are prohibited from blocking you from the accounts that they use for official business. If it is an account that they use for personal use, they can absolutely block you. That is my understanding. So I just wanted to point that out real quick. And I told big shout out to Hollywood Big B for bringing that to my attention. But I let him know, and I let others know that I would talk about it. And I was actually going to talk more about it, primarily because JSO hadn't arrested him at the time. They let him go. And I was like, for real? Like, somebody shows you child porn on their phone and you just let them walk? What kind of crap is that? But he has since been arrested, so there's not really much to talk about at this point. And it was pretty quick. Now, as to what happened, why did he not, why did they not arrest him on the spot? I don't know. I can't speak to that. And hopefully JSO will do a full investigation, and they'll come out and they'll say, here's what happened, and perhaps there is a good reason for it. We'll see. So I just wanted to kind of keep my promise on that. Now, let's get into the topic here today. All right, so our topic is today is this case that comes out of Charlotte. This is, if you've been following the news, now the mainstream media has kind of been pretty like hands off on this. So if you've been following social media, it's all over social media. So we're going to do three things on this show. Get my fingers correct. We're going to do three things today. Number one, I'm going to give you a timeline of all the events that I could come up with that happened related to this particular incident. And this incident was a woman, a Ukrainian refugee, 23-year-old woman. She was she's living in Charlotte. She's leaving work. She gets on their light rail. She's riding home, looking at her phone, and a man behind her named DeCarlos Brown Jr., a black man, he is sitting there, and then all of a sudden just pulls out a knife and just reaches up and stabs her like 3 times. And then they have video footage of it. I'm not going to show the video footage. And then he basically walks down the subway, down the light rail as it's moving, and there's like blood literally dripping all over the floor, and people see it. And then they call the police, and they try to give the woman assistance, and unfortunately, she did not make it. The man has been since arrested. So we're going to talk about that today. So what are the three things that I want to talk about? Number one, I'm going to give you a timeline overview of this. Number two, where'd my note go with that? Like, I'm going to give you a libertarian perspective. I'm going to give you a libertarian perspective because I don't want it to be a partisan issue. What I want to do, because I am a libertarian, because libertarians are notoriously bad about promoting some of our ideas, and we're notoriously bad about kind of looking as if we don't care about innocent victims. What I'm going to do is I'm going to tell you my perspective on some of the things that we should do. Like, how should we handle these kind of things? What our response should be? What should we want in our legal system? You know, what kind of actions do I think would help prevent this? Right now, a lot of people are out there, they're calling for blood. And to be honest with you, calling for blood, fine. I think there's some problems there. You know, like some people seem a little bit too happy to call for blood. But that's not going to prevent the next person from getting stabbed. So what I want to do is I want to present to you some reasonable ideas that I believe fall within the context of a libertarian framework, so that when libertarians, if you're a libertarian and you are discussing policy ideas, this will hopefully give you better ideas so that you can communicate them to your friend. If you're not a libertarian, then perhaps some of what I have to say today will give you some insight into, okay, yes, the libertarians are a little bit on the crazy side. On the other hand, some of the good ones have some decent arguments about making a better society. And I've talked about this. At the end of the day, our goal should be a better society. That's it. It's like, that should be our goal. So that's what I'm going to talk about. And then the third thing I'm going to do is we're going to walk through some things that I've seen on social media, some commentary, and I'm going to give you some kind of like counterpoints to some of those. So those three things that we're going to talk about. So timeline, like how a libertarian world might approach this kind of an issue, and then responses to some of the commentary that I see out there. So let's dive into it. We're going to talk this timeline. So 2011. Now, the man is like 34 years old. He was born in like 1991. So in 2011, this is kind of where I have found the timeline starts. Now, all my sources are in the show notes. So if you want to go look, so this is what I've used. I used a combination of those sources and AI to help kind of piece this all together. But I believe that I've done a solid job of getting everything correct here. But feel free, throw it in the chat if you're watching now, if you're watching later, and you see that I've missed something or I got something incorrect. Let me know. We want to be accurate on this show, right? There's a lot of inaccuracy out there. This show is not one. We don't want to have inaccurate information on this show. So let me know if I've got something wrong. I love it. Like I don't mind being corrected if it's in good faith, because at the end of the day, we cannot make a better society if we can't get the facts on the ground correct. So 2011, this kind of begins his criminal career or record, if you will. He's got charges for larceny, shoplifting, and making some threats, and then some other ones that were dismissed. So nothing major. Okay, he's not armed robbery yet. That actually ends up happening in 2014, 3 years later, where he's convicted of armed robbery with a dangerous weapon, and he's sentenced to 5 years in prison. Then, after he gets out of prison, he's released in 2020. He's under a 1-year post-release supervision. Now, there's some information that I'm gonna give you here. What I'm not sure about is exactly where it fits in the timeline. It wasn't entirely clear, and different sources kind of led me to believe that maybe it perhaps was at different places. But I think this next item happens sometime shortly after his release from prison. So he's living at home with his mom, and his mom kicks him out, claiming, quote, he started saying weird things. Also, quote, he started saying that he wasn't in his body. So in 2020, his mom is observing like, hey, something is not right with my son. Other than the fact that, yes, he committed a crime. He shouldn't have done that. That aside, something is not right. He's saying weird stuff, talking about he's not in his body. Like, what's going on here? Okay. Then in February of 2021, about a year later, he's arrested for assaulting his sister in Charlotte. Caused her minor injuries, but those charges were dropped due to family concerns. The family concerns that I think were at play here were concerns over mental health. Now, there is a point for which his family is concerned about mental health. It's not clear from all the information out there exactly what year, let alone what month, those concerns were presented. Then also in February of 2021, he is arrested for injury to personal property and trespassing after damaging the door at his sister's residence. So, and I probably should have kind of put that together. So he's had some domestic problems in 2021. Then we get to July of 2022. He's arrested for disorderly conduct and domestic disturbance. Now, I don't have the details of what that is, but he's yelling, causing a disturbance, and he gets minimal consequences. Now, this may again be the issue with his sister. The issue with his sister may have been the prior one back in February of the prior year. Not really sure, but in one of those instances, he bit his sister. And then that's when she dropped the charges over concerns with mental health. So I'm not really sure if that was in July of 2022 or February of 2021. Okay. All right. So then it seems like he's quiet between July 2022 and then January of 2025. That's when all of a sudden he gets arrested again. All right. This time he's arrested for misusing 911 during a welfare check, claiming, quote, man-made material, end quote, was controlling his body. And then and we'll get into this is when the judge released him on a written promise to reappear. Now, somewhere in 2025, I believe, it could be earlier, but I believe it was in 2025, somewhere in 2025, perhaps after this January incident, his mother sought to have involuntary psychiatric commitment after being violent at home. Now, again, it's unclear exactly when this involuntary psychiatric commitment was attempted. And I believe he actually had a short-term commitment. So again, the details here are a little unclear to me. I was doing my best to kind of, look through all these different news articles and, figure out who has got, the right information and does it match up with, other reports and whatnot. So I'm doing my best here, folks. All right. So then in July of 2025, he is ordered by a judge to have a forensic mental health evaluation. Now in July, he's back in court with his lawyer, his public defender, and his public defender questioned his competency to stand trial for prior charges. Okay. So then the judge said, all right, well, you need to have a forensic mental health evaluation. However, that evaluation was not completed. And he wasn't detained either or committed at this point. He was just basically let go. So now we know in July of this year, now we have guaranteed documentation that there were concerns about his mental health. Prior to that, it's unclear to what extent it was documented. And when I say documented, I mean beyond the family with a court or a judge or the police or, somebody, from the government, if you will, has come out and they wrote a report or, in some way they have documented this. It's not clear to me, but it's very clear that by July of 2025, he definitely has, there is definitely a concern about his mental health. Now, somebody on internet pointed out, they were like, well, that just sounds like his lawyer trying to, get him out of, maybe. I don't know because I haven't read the transcripts. I haven't read the court documents specifically. I'm going based on news stories and what I could pick up. So I don't know if this was just, hey, the public defender was trying to get him off by, reason of insanity, or if, more importantly, the public defender was like, no, we really do have a potential problem here that he may not actually be able to stand trial. Now, the public defender is not going to be like, you might need to lock this guy up permanently in a, in a psych ward. He's not going to necessarily do that, but he could be presenting mental health issues as a way to get his client off the hook, which is his job, like it or love it or hate it. Or he could say, hey, there is a real concern here, and we don't want to send this man to prison if he's got mental health issues. So it's one of the two. I don't know which one. Then in August, on the 22nd of August, he jumps the fare basically on Charlotte's Lynx Blue Line. And so he's riding on board without paying. Okay, that's of like all the things here that we have going on. That's probably the least concerning of everything. This is where you've probably seen the video. He's sitting behind Iryna, and he's kind of being fidgety. And then all of a sudden, he just reaches up and just starts stabbing her. I think he stabbed her like 3 times, once in the neck, and then she died on the scene. He's arrested on the platform with a self-inflicted laceration. So it's not, I don't really know exactly what happened there. Perhaps he was swinging wildly and ended up stabbing himself, whatever. Okay. August 26th, he's charged with first-degree murder and hospitalized briefly for injuries before being booked. And then on the 29th, he appears in court. He's denied bond. A competency evaluation is ordered to assess his mental fitness for trial. And then on September 3rd, the Charlotte Area Transit System, CATS, they announced an increased ticket enforcement and security staffing in response to the killing. We're going to address that here in a moment. September 5th, the surveillance video of the attack is released publicly by CATS. That's when all hell on the internet broke loose. And everybody's been having outrage and debates galore. September 7th, a GoFundMe was set up, but that was shut down after public backlash. Political figures, including Trump, criticized the systemic failures here. And then on September 8th, court orders 60-day hospital evaluation for Brown's schizophrenia, addressing mental health concerns post-arrest. So there you have it. That is the basic history of what happened and played out. And all of that is going to be important in what I have to say going forward. So I wanted to make sure, and I did my best to make sure that's completely accurate. Again, if I've made a mistake, feel free to let me know. All right, so now let's move in to my libertarian perspective. And then after the libertarian perspective, we'll take a little intermission. Then we'll come back and I will address some of the commentary that I've seen online. So I've got 5 elements that I think are of value here. And these elements, I think, are what we need to focus on as a society. Number 1, we need to enforce the rule of law impartially without bias. Number 2, prioritize self-defense and community protection. That's going to be interesting. Number 3, swift and proportionate punishment. Number 4, address mental health through voluntary and or involuntary targeted interventions. And the last one, number 5, minimize ideological interference in the justice system. So let's start with the very first one here. We're going to enforce the rule of law impartially without bias. Now, evidence-based risk assessments are necessary. Okay, when we have evidence-based risk assessments, then we can prevent imminent threats. But right now, people are swinging wildly all over the internet. Now, I realize the court of public opinion is not the same as the rule of law. However, what we have to consider is that a lot of people online want their opinions to be enforced by law. And there are problems, and we'll talk about that when I go to the third segment here, and we talk about when I address some of the commentary that's out there. So this is going to get addressed a little bit more. Now, it needs to be clear. This is why I did the timeline. Up until 2014, when he's actually sentenced to prison, there's not much in regard for calling for harsher sentences. He's just a run-of-the-mill criminal at that point, right? And I'm talking about before the armed robbery. Up until that, it's just simple things. Not good things, but simple things. And the reason we point that out here is that none of those necessarily indicate future murder. This is why we have to be impartial. We cannot be biased, right? So a lot of people are like, he was arrested 14 times. Many of those times were for trivial-ish matters, right? Like none of them are too trivial. Okay, maybe jumping the light rail and not paying for a ticket. That, again, like I said, that's the least of my concerns. The rest of them are concerning on some level, but they don't necessarily say, hey, red flag, this guy might commit a murder later. Okay? So we have to be without bias. We have to want and demand impartiality in our law. Okay? Because we can't just call for harsher sentences because based on what? Now, he did go to prison for armed robbery, okay, for 5 years. He was in prison, and he was released in 2020. And his mental health only appears to have been clear since roughly around 2025, although his mother did kick him out prior for being aggressive. But that doesn't necessarily mean that it's very clear to people that he's got mental health issues. It's not yet clear. I mean, and I haven't heard the mother's full statement, so maybe there's more to her statement that would make more sense, and I would say, okay, yes, she clearly identified that there were mental health issues, or she was just like, man, he's talking crazy. I don't know what the hell he's on. You know, what is he going on about? I don't know, right? So it's not clear to me exactly, but we have to know this information because you cannot solve a problem. You cannot make a better world if you're not dealing with the absolute facts. Now, I want to read you something that I wrote based on this notion of like, you know, imminent threats and, you know, calling for harsher punishment. Because what we have going on with our bias right now, with our, you know, we got like the left, they constantly want to call for more compassion. And then the right's like, well, we need more punishment. Let me read this to you. I said, people who commit violent crimes are freed regularly. Okay, so this happens all the time. Some engage in further violence, others never again. Only 3 to 5% of violent crimes are attributable to mental health. We need a system that better identifies and manages mental health violence, repeat offenders, and the truly repentant. Okay? We don't really have that right now. We don't have a robust system that we can use and say it usually gets it right and identifies who is going to be the truly repentant person, who is going to be a repeat offender, and who may have mental health issues and that we need to, you know, look into further to prevent violence. We don't have that. How do I know? Go look up how many people, you know, end up going into jail, coming out of jail, or in some way are flagged by somebody. Maybe somebody's flagged at school. Maybe it's after school, you know, not like after they graduate, right? There are plenty of stories out there where we look back and we're like, the warning signs were there. What happened? And this happens all the time, unfortunately. So we do not have a system that properly identifies and manages mental health violence, repeat offenders, and the truly repentant. And that is what we should want as a society, because we're going to handle all three of those differently. Those with mental health problems, we need to assess and determine, is this mental health problem one that could potentially go on to harm themselves or another person? Or is it a mental health issue for which it can be easily managed, and even if the person slips up, they're at a very, very low risk of harming themselves or somebody else, right? We need that. That's going to be one direction that we go. Then we have to find, okay, who are the people that might be a repeat offender? What are the things that we can identify about repeat offenders? How can we identify this early on? How can we distinguish who might be a repeat offender and somebody who's truly repentant? How do we do that? I don't know, but I don't think we have that right now. Why? Because again, we have a lot of people that are repeat offenders. How many? I didn't look up the stats, but we have them. We have people roaming the street right now. Some of them are truly repentant. Those people, if you committed a crime, you did your time, you realized your mistake, you sought whatever help you needed, maybe you had anger management problems, whatever. You sought help, you got that resolved, you're ready to be a functioning, productive member of society. Yes, I want you to be let out of jail. If you are not that person and you're ready to commit another crime again, or you're going to fall back on your old ways, then I want to try to find a way where we can identify that. I'm not talking any Palantir weirdness. I'm just talking about like human to human assessments. And then if you're somebody who, hey, maybe when you went into jail, you were fine, but maybe through the course of time, your mental health deteriorated for one reason or another. Maybe it was inevitable. Maybe prison just did that to you. I don't really know. We need to be able to identify that as well and say, hold up, we got to treat all of these differently. That's what we need. We don't have. And I said, but we cannot get to that so long as the left fixates on compassion while the right fixates on punishment. And that's what's going on right now. Right now, people are just yelling back and forth. People are like, oh, demand he needs to be executed. We need to have a public, execution, right? You have all this crazy. There's a lot of bloodlust out there right now. And the truth of the matter is that bloodlust is not justice. I said this. That isn't to say the man should not face justice, which may even result in the death penalty. It's only to remind people not to become monsters themselves when fighting monsters. Okay? I want to make sure that I don't become a monster in order to fight a monster. And I don't mean in the moment. Okay? If somebody breaks into my house at 2 a.m, I'm becoming a monster. Okay? But if we have a situation where a crime has been committed, the person's been apprehended, that's the time I don't want to become a monster. Now, the person is in custody. We have time to evaluate objectively and deal with the situation as a proper society should. Now, am I saying we should be compassionate to criminals? No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying we should be fair, objective. We should be like, a king. And I don't mean we should have a monarchy, but I'm saying like if you think of a king who's wise, like King Solomon was known to be wise, and people would come to him with their problems and he would think about it and then he would give a judicious answer. That's what I think our society should be once we have somebody in custody. We should say, all right, what are the facts that we're dealing with, right? What do we need to do? What is in the best interest of this person and society, right? If they've got mental health issues, real ones, not the made up ones, real ones, then perhaps they need to be institutionalized. If they do not have a mental health issue, they're just a violent, aggressive person, then perhaps they need to be in jail. And if they're a person who once was violent, but has repented from their ways, and I mean truly repented, they are they're not just sorry about it, but they've done the things necessary to make sure they don't repeat that kind of behavior, then that person I want to have mercy on. That's the person we need compassion on. We don't need compassion necessarily for everybody. What we need is objective, judicious ways of thinking about the problem, right? We need righteous judgment, if you will. Okay, so now, again, the mental health here, it only appears to have been clear since 2025. It might have been present earlier. I don't know. There does seem to be some suggestion that it might have been observable as early as 2020 when he was released from jail, right? So we could ask ourselves, all right, well, when prisoners are released, are they given a mental health evaluation? Are they? I don't know. They should be, because maybe they came in and maybe they flew under the radar and they have an early onset for mental health disorder that's leading them to violence. Maybe they don't. But again, as I just pointed out, we should want to we should want to address each one of these distinctly, appropriately. Let's move on to the next item. So that was my enforce the rule of law, impartiality without bias. Now let's move on to prioritize self-defense and community protection. So this is very interesting. The CAT system, the Charlotte Area Transit System, CATS, they currently prohibit, and I'm quoting from their own website, it's prohibited for you to, quote, carry, possess, or have within immediate access any dangerous weapon. Okay, that's a problem. That is a huge problem. Now, this is not a situation where I would say, watching the video, if Iryna had been armed, she would have totally been able to be here today. I'm not saying that. What I am saying is that this is a problem. The fact that people are riding public transit and they're not allowed to be armed means they are defenseless against somebody, like in this case, who was armed. Why is that? The most likely people to comply are who? It's the very people who might need to defend themselves, who aren't criminals, because criminals don't obey the law. And this is an interesting point because I've seen tons of commentary, not all of it, but I've seen a lot. And I haven't seen anybody point out, hey, you're not allowed to carry. You're not allowed to have any kind of weapon on this light rail. That's a problem. Because what if somebody gets on there, like this man did, and they don't attack just one person, but they go on to attack another person? Well, now all these people are defenseless. And you know what? If you don't have a weapon in your hand and somebody else does, even if you're a tough guy, you're going to be a little hesitant to want to try to step in and get involved because you're at a disadvantage. So I think right there, that should be like a huge priority, but it's not. And nobody's really talking about it. People are too busy worrying about their bloodlust. All right, let's go on. What's the next item? Swift, proportionate punishment. Now, a lot of people are calling for all kinds. They're like, he should be executed. They're like, he was arrested 14 times. How could this possibly happen? You know, we should put the judges in jail, blah, 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 all this stuff. Okay, I get it. There is sometimes too much leniency, but we need to step back. We need to evaluate objectively, righteously. We need to use good judgment, and we need to say, okay, leniency, it's fair on, say, maybe your first offense, especially minor offenses, right? If it's your first murder, we shouldn't be lenient on you. But if you just shoplifted, okay, maybe there's an argument to be made on leniency there. Because again, a lot of people shoplift and they don't go on to commit murders. I have shoplifted, not anytime recent. It was like when I was a teenager, like when I was like 6th grade or something like that. I shoplifted like once or twice. Okay, but I have never went on to murder somebody or assault somebody with a deadly weapon. Okay? Right? And many people, that's how it plays out. So if we want to talk leniency, then we can say, look, we can establish some rules at the state level, not the federal level. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But at the state level, we can say, like, look, on your first offense, if it's a minor offense, if you can show us good reason to be lenient, then we can codify it in the law that there's an opportunity for leniency if you can demonstrate why, right? However, once you've been to prison for a violent crime, leniency should be off the table. Now, perhaps it should be off the table for some standard amount of time, like maybe 10 years, or perhaps it's permanent, right? I would favor more like 10 years or 15 years and say, hey, we have evaluated you. We believe that you are not a risk to society, so we're going to let you out of prison. However, it's always possible that we could be wrong. So, because you have committed a crime, we're going to let you out. We're going to restore your rights back. However, until 10 years have passed or 15 years has passed, there is no more leniency for you. Because hopefully in this time that you were in prison, you've had time to think about what you did. You've had time to identify why you did it and then address that why. It's not my job. My job isn't to address your why. That's your job if you're the criminal. And you have the standard, in my opinion, or you should have the standard to prove everything. Prove that you're no longer a danger to society. Prove that, hey, you should be granted leniency if you commit a crime sometime in the future. And again, we're talking minor crimes. So if you get out of prison because you committed armed robbery and then you go 15 years without killing, without committing a violent crime, and then in 15 years you go and you commit a violent crime, there's no leniency for that. Okay? So again, we're back to this standard of how we're going to address leniency. I think we need to evaluate our policies at a state level, perhaps even at a local level. But we need to do this with good judgment. We can't just let our emotions, get the best of us and be like, oh my God, it's a white girl and a black guy. Which is what a lot of people are doing. We're going to talk about that. All right, fourth, address mental health through voluntary or targeted interventions, voluntary or involuntary and targeted interventions. So what do I mean by that? This might get me in trouble with some of the libertarians, but I think I'm right. We already have a society where government can detain you and deprive you of your rights. It does require due process. So if I'm walking down the street and I'm wearing what I'm wearing, right? I've got my red undershirt and I've got this gray button up that I'm wearing, and I got a hat and jeans on. I'm walking down the street. I'm 5'3". An officer hears, hey, there's a 5'3" individual wearing a gray shirt and a hat. He's about 5 foot tall. He just committed armed robbery, and they see me. Okay, they can detain me and say, hold up. You sound like the guy we're looking for. Stop right there. We're going to take you in. We're going to address whether or not you're the guy we're looking for. And if once they determine that I'm not, because I'm not a criminal, right, then they should let me go. We should have a similar mechanism for mental health. One of the things that I read about this mother is that she tried to have him committed, and she was unsuccessful because he's an adult. And apparently in Charlotte, I don't know the laws, but apparently in Charlotte, unless you are responsible for a person, like you're a parent or whatever, you can't get them committed. So she was unsuccessful at getting him committed. Well, here's the thing. If somebody comes back from jail and an immediate family member, can demonstrate, hey, there is a serious concern. And what do we mean by demonstrate? These are things that we have to work out. I'm not trying to give you all the answers here. I'm trying to give you a framework, a direction for which we can head and create a better society. So I think we should have a mechanism where the mother could go and say, look, there is a serious concern to be had here. You need to go and detain this man, and you need to do an evaluation because I think there's a mental health issue. Now, she could be wrong, right? We want to be careful because we don't want to detain people just to detain them. We don't want to abuse that. But our system already has a mechanism for which your rights can be deprived temporarily and in some cases permanently, like if you get permanently put in jail, right? We should have a similar situation or mechanism when it comes to mental health. Hey, somebody's demonstrated in a similar manner, like, hey, an officer pulled you over, they stopped you and said, hey, you look like the person that I've been told to look for. We're going to stop you. We're going to evaluate this situation. We're going to find out if you're the person I'm looking for. If you're not, we're going to let you go. If you are, we're keeping you, and then we'll proceed through that process. We need a similar process for mental health. Hey, a mother has demonstrated that her son is problematic. He got out of jail. He had committed armed robbery. When he came home, he was talking crazy. He's been aggressive. We need to detain this guy long enough to determine, is there really a mental health issue? And I believe if this was in place, it could have been done in 2020, 5 years before Iryna was killed, or Iryna, I think it's Iryna, right? 5 years before she was murdered. Okay? That's plenty of time to evaluate somebody's mental health, even if you got a backlog. And we need a good system. I mean, I want you to think about this, folks. How long, go Go to Google, type in mental health crisis. And then what I want you to do is there's a little option where you can drop down and you can put in the date. And I want you to put in a date where it ends at like, say, 12/31/2020 or even earlier than that. And you will find articles going back to, I think I found all the way to like 2014. You can find articles that are saying, hey, we have some mental health issues going on in this country. They need to be addressed. Okay? The mental health crisis that I believe we have, this is not a new thing. It may be abused, but that doesn't mean it's not real. We need to start treating it like it's a real problem. Now, when it comes to some mechanism for dealing with mental health that could deprive somebody of their rights, their right to be free, their right to movement, whatever, right? That system has to be fair, direct, robust, and most importantly, a speedy process. Not too fast. We don't want to be sloppy. But we want to make sure that we have a mechanism that says, hey, if you are observed to maybe have mental health problems, we have a system that can help identify it, get you the help that you need, and more importantly, prevent you from doing something that can't be undone. But we don't really have that. And we don't really talk about it. Because again, you've got the left, they're too busy being compassionate. And the right, well, they're too busy talking about executing people publicly. Okay, well, great. You execute somebody publicly, okay, and I don't mean that literally, a sarcastic great. You execute somebody publicly. Let's say you execute a lot of people publicly. How many of those people might you not have needed to execute that we could have just said, you have a mental health problem that we can absolutely address? Right? I generally oppose the death penalty. The death penalty. Okay? I generally oppose it. However, it is something that does exist right now. So what I'm offering is not the full-blown libertarian idea. I'm just saying I think that there's some opportunities from libertarian thought processes to improve the world we have. Because clearly, it's 2025, and we have not worked it out. This country started in 1776. I mean, technically a little earlier, but, you know, we basically are 1776, right? And now it's 2025. We're over 200 years old, and we haven't worked out mental health issues enough so that people can safely ride public transit. We have a problem. We're not addressing it, and we're going to continue to not address it so long as it becomes a partisan issue. And then my last item here, minimize ideological interference in justice. So this is, again, it's neither soft on crime nor tough on crime policies, because those policies are not necessarily going to resolve the issue, right? The soft on crime, they may resolve issues where somebody who needs to have compassion, who is, you know, not going to go on to commit the most heinous crimes. Yeah, that might work for that person. And the tough on crime might work on the person who is going to go on to kill, you know, one or more people, you know? So the tough on crime, the soft on crime, those may address the extremes, but we're not addressing the middle where there's a lot of ambiguity, where there's possibly opportunities to address issues before somebody gets hurt. That is what I am proposing that we focus on. How do we prevent people from getting hurt and at the same time balance the rights of every individual? Again, not every person that commits armed robbery and goes to jail and gets out is going to go on to murder somebody. Nor will every person that gets put in prison for even a violent crime, nor will they necessarily become schizophrenic, you know, have a mental health crisis. So we have to balance these things properly so that we can create the absolute best society that we can. Because right now, I don't think we have it. Bloodlust, again, I'm going to repeat it, is not just being tough on crime. That is people indulging, becoming the monster that they're trying to fight. So we need to minimize that. So we need to mock people when somebody comes out and says, we just need to kill them and that'll solve the problem. No, it won't. Because The problem has already happened. And I saw people, I argued with them. They were like, well, if you just publicly execute all these people, then other people will get the picture. And I'm like, no, actually, that's not true. Do I have that post popped? Yeah. So somebody pointed out, they said, public execution is a great deterrent. You see a guy strangling to death on the end of a rope, and the odds of you doing what he did decreases substantially. So here was my response. Specious. When public executions were a thing, which they were at one point, we still had crime. We still had murderers. Vlad the Impaler, back in the 14th century, he was well known for extreme punishment. Some of it was probably exaggerated, although I doubt too much. He still had crime. People try to come back at me and they're like, there was a golden goblet that was set. That is folklore as far as I know, but he still had crime. He still had problems with people. Go look up the issues that he had with the Boyers. Okay? So no, it's not that Vlad the Impaler, but besides the point, he was so vicious that it's almost guaranteed that somebody who was innocent or did not need that level of viciousness got it. Right? So yeah, you could say we're going to go to the extreme and we're just going to be the worst terrible person ever, right? And that's going to be tough on crime. But to what extent are we willing to go and, get innocent people caught in the crossfire? And to what extent will it actually work? There is a point of diminishing returns. And then I also pointed out, I said, Jimmy Hoffa, if you're young and you don't know who that is, Jimmy Hoffa was he was a union boss, and he got mixed in with the mob, and then he disappeared. And nobody knows what happened to him. There's a lot of speculation. He got buried in concrete somewhere. Don't really know. Nobody knows what happened to him. But we're all pretty sure that he did something he was not supposed to do with the mob and paid for it, right? And look, again, this if the mob even existed. Just saying, here's the point. Even if you take cartels, you take mob, you take organized crime, there is still people that try to commit crimes against them. So no, there is no evidence anywhere that if you're just tough enough, that it's going to bring our crime down substantially. All you're going to do, that's what I said, public executions deter those least likely to commit murder or violent crime. So somebody who's kind of like, should I do it? Somebody who's like thinking about it, but not fully committed. Yeah, that person may be deterred. But the person who's fully committed or the person who's crazy, legitimately crazy, that's not necessarily going to deter them. So no, that's not a good solution. All right. We have to be careful about our ideological interferences in the justice system. Now, let's get into some comments here in the chat. And then after that, after intermission, we'll come back and I will present to you some of the public commentary, and then I will give you some of my own follow-up. So let's see here. Let's see that. Let's go over here to the live chat. So my VA lady says, I'm late. That's okay. No worries. Seems like you're not live on YouTube because it's your thumbnail, I think. I thought I saw that I was live on YouTube. We having a problem there too? Let's see here. Let's make sure. All right. It says live. Oh. All right. So it looks like there's a problem there. I don't know what's going on. Let's see. Can I even toss something in the chat there real quick? Here, let me. All right. Let me see if. Okay. So I'm glad you brought that to my attention. I checked it earlier and it looked like it was working. Let's see if you're on. Gotta spell it right. YouTube. Issue. I'll post the show later. Okay, so that should pop up at least. Okay, so for whatever reason, the video feed is not going to YouTube. I don't know why. It also was not going to X earlier. X was actually showing me a problem, and it seems like YouTube was deceiving me. I thought it was just a little delayed or something. So, all right. Yeah, just a spooky house with fog. Yeah, that was the intro. It was supposed to look kind of resemble like like an insane asylum. It's kind of the gist I was going for. I don't know if I probably should put some more elements in that image to make it more clear, but I don't know. So I'll repost that later. Yeah, and then I'm not seeing DL live on X either. He's in Rumble and Facebook though. Yeah, Facebook is working. The stream is actually going directly to Facebook and it's going directly to Rumble. Rumble is apparently failing me and not sending everything out. So I don't know. That's where we are with that. So anyway, let's go ahead and let's go to intermission here real quick, and then we'll be back and we'll talk about some other stuff.
Let us make man. This is the scripture where God was talking about creating the human. And when he talked about creating the human, he said, let us make man. And for me, the us in let us make man entails and implies to me that I should be assisting God with making men. And this is where the X for Boys comes into play. This is the new man-making machine in Albany, Georgia. We started the X for Boys program in January of 2019. Albany, Georgia is one of the poorest cities in the nation, and also Albany, Georgia has one of the highest crime rates in the nation. And so I took it upon myself to curb that by working with young men and boys in the community and teaching them how to work in the skilled trades, such as working on cars, fixing houses, simple home improvement, simple brake repair, oil changes, plumbing, anything of that nature, to try and help boys actually use their hands.
I appreciate King Randall for taking the time out of his life to give us young men the opportunity to do things that can help us be better men and better people in life.
The X for Boys is creating men that'll be self-sufficient, that will be able to protect their women and children, and will be able to go out and earn things for themselves. We do not teach victimhood. There is nobody holding us down. I am teaching the boys that they can go out and get whatever it is that they want when they want it to. They have the same Father as Jesus, and that is God. And so they are able to go and do whatever they want to. The scripture says, greater is the God that is in me than the God that's in the world. So it's up to us to teach them about the God that's in themselves and to create everything that they want. Let us make man. Follow us on social media at New Emerging King, and you can go to the xforboys.org for our website.
Right. I love that account. King Randall I believe is what he goes by on X. I love it. He posts videos all the time. And what's interesting is a lot of people give him crap. You know, they're like, oh, you know, why are you teaching, you know, these young black kids, you know, white people stuff? And he's like, I'm teaching them how to fix cars and how to dress proper and how to interact with the police so they don't get hurt. You know, it's like, it's really bizarre. But I actually really, really appreciate him. And to be honest with you, and we're going to talk about this, I think he is the answer to the kind of problems that we're seeing here. Now, he can't answer all of them, right? Like if somebody has legitimate mental health issues, that can't be solved just by learning how to fix a car necessarily, right? Maybe, perhaps, like if you have depression, then perhaps some of these strategies might help you, you know, maintain better control over your depression. And so maybe you won't harm yourself. But if you end up getting schizophrenia, I just don't, like, I've not read anything that would suggest that his approach is going to deal with schizophrenia, bipolar, or any of these other, you know, mental health issues that are a little bit more on the serious side. So, so support him. By the way, speaking of support, let me tell you, support Liberty Dad Show and keep this show thriving. I want you to use Liberty Dad. That's the code Liberty Dad, all one word, for 10% off at blackgunsmatter.shop. Or you can go to our referral link. I'll put it in it's in the show notes. Go check that out, blackguns.matter.shop /discount, blah, blah, blah. Go down there, click on it. It'll take you to Black Guns Matter. That helps support the show. Buy something from Maj. He's a great guy. He's another guy that's out there doing what he can in the urban communities to help them out. Now, I will say neither him nor King Randall, the guy that we just watched, neither of them are explicitly black folk only. Okay, they do work with white folk as well. In fact, I think King Randall posted a video of a young white boy that joined his group. It just so happens that where he lives, it's predominantly black, so that's who you mostly see. Then you can also support the show on Rumble. You can hit that. You can hit the green $ button for rants during the show, or subscribe for just $5 a month. But you know, who knows if Rumble will make it work or not. By the way, connect with me on all platforms via Linktree. You can check that out in the show notes. Your support keeps the Liberty Vibes here strong. All right, let's get into some social media comments. So let's first take a look at Twitter, and let's see some of the things that we've got here. All right, so here's Matt Walsh. Now, Matt Walsh is interesting because it feels like 50% of the time I agree with him, and then the other 50% of the time I not only disagree with him, but I strongly disagree with him. So here's what he said. There are a lot of people, even on the right, who don't want to talk about the racial angle of these crimes. But here's the fact. If I told you that a person was randomly butchered on a train, and then I asked you to guess the race of the assailant, you would guess black and be correct nearly every time. That's just the simple reality. We all know it. There's a very obvious pattern here, well established and over the course of many decades. The dividing line is not between those who recognize it and those who don't. We all recognize it. The line is between those who are willing to say it out loud and those who aren't. Okay, so I kind of lied. I guess I somewhat agree with him, right? But the problem here is not that people observe a particular pattern of behavior. It's that when they try to diagnose and say, why is this pattern of behavior, why does it exist? So here's another response that I made online. Was it to this one? No, it was to a different comment of his, but relevant here. I said, Dr. Martin Luther King said in his 1967 The Other America speech, this is what he said, quote, "Racism is not based on some empirical generalization. It is based rather on ontological affirmation. It is not the assertion that certain people are behind culturally or otherwise because of a people is inferior. Because of environmental conditions. It is the affirmation that the very being of people is inferior. And this is the great tragedy of it." So he's basically saying, this is racism when you say that a certain group of people are inferior inherently. But it's not racism to say there are problems in this particular community that are a result of some sort of environmental condition. Now, he was he was talking more about like policies and things like that. I would extend it further, particularly in this day and age, and I would say there are systemic problems within the black community that do need to be addressed. We'll talk about that more in just a moment. I don't think it's racist to say that. It's not racist to observe and say, hey, in the black community, there is not the dedication toward education that we might see in, say, white communities, Asian communities, Jewish communities, right? It's just not there. Doesn't mean that they're inferior per se, not at an inherent level. It doesn't mean that all black people don't care about education. There are plenty of very intelligent black folk who love reading, love education, and were very good students, right? All that is saying is there's too much of not enough attention going on in the black community. There's not much I can do about it as a sort of almost kind of, but not really white person, right? White people can't fix that problem. That has to be internal in the community. The community has to say, look, it's time for us to level up, and we're not going to tolerate people that won't level up, and we're going to shun you. We're going to shun our own people, right? So I kind of agree. And so then I go on and I said, the problem isn't observations or patterns. So that's not the problem. It's not that people observe. It's the assumed root cause too often accompanied by said observations, right? It's basically when people get all like, oh my God, them thar Negroes is dumb. Look, I got me nifty charts and graphs saying so, right? That's what it is. That's what it ends up being. It's one thing to observe and say, hey, it looks like we have crime rates that are disproportionate in this particular community compared to other communities, right? It's another thing to take from that and say, I guess these black folk just have low IQ and they're just all prone to violence. Okay. That's not solving the problem. That does not move our society forward one bit. And I know some of these people online, they'll be like, we just need to kick people back into Africa. Okay, that's not going to happen. But I don't care how much you want it to happen. It's not going to happen, right? Are we having an honest conversation or not? It's not going to happen, okay? And it's a dumb answer. But a good answer is to say, hey, there's not enough focus on education. There's not enough focus on fatherless homes. Those are things that can be resolved or improved. You may not be able to resolve them entirely, but you can improve them tremendously. And we have history of where they were better in the black community. We have that history. So it's very reasonable, I think, to look at Dr. King's words and say, Dr. King has pointed out what constitutes racism, what doesn't, what is and is not racism. It's not racism to say, hey, black community, you're not all responsible necessarily for each other. One black person isn't responsible for the other black person. But since there is such a thing as community outrage, perhaps you start being more outraged at people within your community and say, not acceptable. Because we can look back in history and we can see when there was a time where that actually did happen. So the problem here with Matt is not that he's observing something. It's not that we can make that guess, right? And we can make that guess for other groups. Like if you said, all right, if there was a school shooting, what is the demographic of the shooter? And if somebody said young, white, male, strong chance that they're right. Not close to 100%. I mean, there have been some like female shooters, there have been trans shooters, there have been some black shooters or people of color, right? But there's a strong chance that you're correct if you say young, white, male. If you say, oh man, there's a serial killer on the loose, and somebody said middle-aged, white, male, who's in a, middle class, chances are you're going to be correct. Every group has their failing. It's not a problem. It's not racist to point out and say, for whatever reason, this issue is more prevalent in a particular community. But then if we want to improve that situation, we should probably focus on, okay, what is it that we're thinking is the problem? That's the issue. What do we got here? Morgan Ariel says death penalty now. Okay? And that cures this guy from potentially killing again. However, given the circumstances, even if he doesn't get the death penalty, the likelihood is that he's going to jail for the rest of his life. So, probably not going to kill again, at least not any innocent people, right? Like innocent in the sense that people in jail are presumed to be guilty, right? But that doesn't stop the next killer. So it's not a good answer. It's a waste of an answer. I know everybody's upset because it's a pretty white girl. I mean, can we be honest? I don't like saying it, but I think that's kind of the truth. It's a pretty white girl. That's why people are outraged. If she was a blue-haired feminist that was stabbed, people like Andrew Wilson would be like, you voted for it. I know he would say that because he has said that, right? And that has been said by a good portion of men online. Well, you voted for it, right? That's why people are angry, because it's a pretty white girl. Stop lying to yourselves. Let's see. Joel Webon, this is a very interesting one. BLM used to always mention black parents needing to have the talk with their black children when they got their driver's license. You have to be careful. Cops are out to get you. I opposed this rhetoric because it was false. Not really true. It's not, it's not as bad. It's not entirely untrue, and it is not as bad as people make it out to be. But it's not entirely false. White parents are now having the talk with their white children. Don't sit near a black man on a subway. Better yet, don't go on the subway at all. I support this rhetoric because it's true. Kind of, not because of black people necessarily. There is some truth here. It's not what he's making it out to be. He's making it out to be like I pass black people all the time. They nod at me or just pay me no mind. They walk by because they're doing their thing, they're shopping, whatever. Right? There are thousands and thousands of interactions between white people and black people that go under the radar because nothing happened. Right? Then he goes on to say woke right isn't a thing. I actually kind of agree with that. BLM lied about white racism. I think they exaggerated it. I don't think they lied about it. But the new right acknowledges this truth about anti-white hatred. Okay? So, in this particular case, I don't know if there was anti-white sentiment that led DeCarlos to kill Iryna. I don't know. If he was actually crazy, then it kind of doesn't matter what his motivation was. He was crazy and needs to be institutionalized. This is why I'm talking about the nuance. It's important. But Joel Webb here's the interesting thing. I actually don't mind if people have these conversations. And the reason is, when we start having frank conversations about how we feel, then other people can learn to address them. If we're willing to listen. So if the black community says, hey, we don't feel comfortable around the police, we feel like they're targeting us. Let's assume that it's only partially true. Let's assume that they're exaggerating. That is still how they feel. So if the police want a better relationship with the black community, then they can start working with the black community to create one. Alternatively, on the other side of the coin, if white people start saying, look, I'm seeing a lot of these stories and I'm kind of feeling a little uncomfortable when I'm around, a burly black man. Maybe he's dressed, maybe he's got his pants sagging, whatever, right? And if they can be free to have that conversation, then the black community can likewise say, you know what? The white folk are kind of afraid of us. Do we like that? Right? How do we repair that? How do we improve that situation? We need to have a community conversation. Right? So I kind of, I'm on the fence a little bit with this one. I think there's some hyperbole going on. There's some exaggeration going on all sides here. But I think ultimately at the core, we should be having these conversations and let people know how we feel. What you feel is not always accurate, right? I've said this before. Sometimes I get mad at somebody and I want to punch them in the face, right? That's how I feel in the moment. But then 5 minutes later, maybe I'm like, all right, you know what? I'm not angry no more. That's just how I felt at the moment. I actually don't want to punch you in the face anymore, right? I did, but now I don't, right? We can have feelings. It's okay. And we should be able to acknowledge them. And the feelings don't have to be backed up by umpteen studies and statistics. We can just say, this is how I feel because I've seen some videos. Great. Then this other person over here, this community over here can say, let's go and try to work out so that the opposing group feels more comfortable around us. Whether it's the police and the black community, or the black community and the white community, black community, the Asian community, white people and Jews, whatever. That's how we improve our society, by having honest dialogue. We're not having it right now because everybody's afraid to say how they feel. And no, not every time somebody says how they feel will it be accurate, and sometimes it may be wildly wrong. But we got to start somewhere. Let's see, what else we got? Andre Williams, this is a good one. I like this one. He said, and he's a black guy, and I looked up, I followed through to all of his links and to his YouTube page to make sure that this is actually a real black person, because you never know online. He says, and black people wonder why people don't like being around us. Interesting point. 23-year-old Ukrainian refugee Iryna Zarutska was fatally stabbed in an unprovoked attack by a 34-year-old DeCarlos Brown Jr. on Charlotte's Lynx Blue Line train. This needs to wake everybody up, especially black people, on how we are. Now, he's overgeneralizing in my opinion. Okay, I know, like I said, I know plenty of black people who are not going to just out of nowhere start stabbing people. Okay, so it's an overgeneralization. But he makes a good point. If the black community wants to have a better reputation, well, as I've said before, you don't own your reputation, but you have a lot of power to shape it. And that goes for whether you're the black community, the white community, the police, government, whomever. It applies to everybody. And if you don't like your reputation, then work on fixing it. And if that reputation happens to include a group that you're a part of, whether it's based on immutable characteristics or based on choice, right? You can get together and say, we're going to change this perception about us. That's exactly what King Randall, the guy in the video from the intermission, he's doing. I mean, that's not his intent. His intent is on raising young boys to be proper and good functioning young men and then go on to be men, right? That's his goal. But in the process, he is creating a better vibe about people, in particular, mostly about black people, because that's who he works with mostly, right? So yes, you have the power to influence your reputation, but you don't own it. And if we can't have a frank conversation about it, then we're just going to be at a stalemate. So this one's interesting in a sad way. They say this is an example of why DEI is dangerous to society, especially within the justice system. DEI allowed Magistrate Judge Teresa Stokes, who released 14-time criminal to Carlos Brown Jr. and who never passed the bar exam. I don't know if she didn't pass the bar exam, to continue letting habitual offenders walk free. Iryna Zarutska's blood is on the hands of the state who let this woman be a magistrate without proper certifications. Okay, so let's get a couple things straight here. Number one, I don't know, there's not enough information available that I've seen that says this was a DEI hire. In fact, I don't know if this person knows this, but in 4 U.S. states, you can actually become a lawyer, pass the bar exam without actually going to school. Okay, it's a little different than what they're saying here, right? Because it said that she never passed the bar exam. But I don't know if North Carolina has some provision that allows people to become a judge without doing that, and how many judges might actually be in that situation and be a good judge. Okay, so I'm rejecting this whole DEI until we have further information that really conclusively says she was hired because she was black, because somebody said we need more black judges. I need some more clear information, right? Not a process that you just happen to not like. Okay. Furthermore, it says that 14-time criminal. So again, we walk through the timeline. Many of his crimes early on were not sufficient enough to do much of anything. The armed robbery, that's a big deal. Okay? The violence in the home front, that's a big deal, but the charges were dropped. Not a whole lot that you can go with there. But I think the more important problem is that this judge, is that she ignored what I would say are clear red flags to say, hey, this man needs a mental health evaluation. And from what I've read elsewhere, there does seem to be a problem with the mental health system in Charlotte, perhaps all of North Carolina. So maybe the process or the system is not adequate in the first place. So if you have an inadequate system, it doesn't matter what judge you have. They can't put somebody into a system that is inadequate and expect a good result. So we need to stop with this rhetoric. This DEI rhetoric is garbage, and it's not helpful. It's not getting us to a better society. All it is a bunch of hand waving. All the white people out there that like to say it, they're doing the same thing as the criticism of all the black people that go, it's all the racist police. Okay, great. The white people are like, it's not a bunch of racist police. You don't know what you're talking about. You're just hand waving and screaming in the air incoherently. And then black people are like, or white people are like, it's DEI. And the black people are basically looking at them and saying, same damn thing. You're hand waving in the air and yip yapping without actually providing any improvement to the society around you. You're not helping. Last one here. This one's interesting. I could keep saying that. I could find it. I need new material on that. But anyway, Congressman Randy Fine, who is here in Florida, he's in the district below me, District 6. He said, I'm going to introduce legislation to hold judges accountable when violent repeat offenders they release commit new crimes. Okay? It's easy to release criminals when you're protected by an armed bailiff at all times. The rest of us aren't so lucky. Those 12-plus judges that released to Carlos Brown Jr. should have their day in court too. On what? So here's the catch. When it comes to the mental health issue, when it comes to Teresa Stokes, who let him go, despite his own defender saying, I think there's mental health, despite that time actually having evidence of mental health issues. Okay, so one judge I'm okay with. I'm like, yeah, I think we need to start asking some serious questions. But what about the judges before he was sentenced to jail? What were they supposed to do? What were his crimes again? Right, let's look back up. Let me look back up there. Let me go back to the top of my list here. So some of his crimes were shoplifting, making a threat, larceny. I don't know. Congressman fine. What was somebody supposed to do then? Were they supposed to be like, man, this guy shoplifted, I bet he's going to turn out to be a psycho killer? Like, what based on what? And a lot of people, like I argued with somebody over this because they were like, all these federal judges that are activists and they're just running rampant. Okay, for starters, these weren't federal judges that let him go. They were state judges. So again, we need to know what we're talking about. And a lot of people don't know what they're talking about. And when you don't know what you're talking about, guess what? Whatever solution you provide, it's probably not going to work because you started from an incorrect diagnosis in the first place. Like, look, I'm all about people having their day in court, whether it's a citizen, a judge, a congressman. Everybody should have their day in court if it's deserved. But we need to be very mindful about what that entails. All right, let's see. I got about 5 minutes left before I got to get out of here. Let's see. I had some more content, but do I want to show it? Let's see. Let's see here. Let's show this one. We'll show this one, then we'll call it a day. Here's a meme I saw. So on the left, it shows a guy kind of rolling his eyes. It kind of looks like me, actually, without my hat. You know, the scruffy beard and glasses. I don't know why people are making memes about me. I do not work for CNN, NBC, or ABC. So they have these three outlets tagged there. So it's kind of like this person represents these media outlets, right? And so they're rolling their eyes at the guy stabbing Iryna, okay? But then down below, it shows that they're freaking out over Daniel Penny putting somebody in a chokehold. There is some truth to this, right? The media, the mainstream media, fixates on what they want, and they're very fixated on compassion for criminals. However, if you've been paying attention to social media, the new media, they're just as bad in the opposite direction. They're flipping out over a guy killing somebody, and they were excited. You could almost flip these around, right? And when I say, like, I supported Daniel Penny based on the facts that I was able to put together. When I evaluated the facts, I didn't just say, oh, crazy black man on a subway, white man, go get him, which is what a lot of people acted like. We're not having honest conversations. So if the new media wants to make sure they're not like the old media, get your act together, because you're really just as bad. I've seen plenty of citizen journalists who get stories wrong repeatedly. And I don't mean a little bit wrong. I mean wildly wrong. And they don't suffer any punishment for it. Right? I've seen people, say, hey, I've identified this person as a bad person. Right? So, like, there's a video, of someone, like one, I'll give you an exact case. We're not going to do made up stuff or hypotheticals. An exact case. Sarah is censored. You can look her up. She made a big issue of this woman yelling at a child at a protest. So this is like, I think it was a man, and they had their young daughter maybe in a stroller, and this other woman was yelling and screaming at her. And then Sarah was like, we've identified who this woman is. Go get her, basically, right? And then everybody flocked to go after this woman. It was the wrong woman. She got it wrong. She ended up getting an innocent woman harassed in her effort to try to go get somebody. That's not good journalism. And that's what happens a lot in the new media. This is one of the reasons why I try to be kind of quiet when something breaks and it's in the first 48 to 72 hours. I try to keep it quiet because I'm like, the facts are unfolding. There's a school shooting, and the first information you hear is that 6 people were killed. And then later, once the dust settles, we find out that 2 people were killed, 4 people were injured, but they're going to survive, and sometimes it's even worse than that. So the details are just all over the place. So I'm like, you know what? The new media, they're doing the same thing that the old media does. They're rushing to get the story first so they can say, I called it. Go look it up online. Tons of people will be like, I called it. I called this. I called this. I called. They're in a desperate attempt to be just like the old mainstream media. And they're getting the stories about as accurate and correct as the old mainstream media did. Now, there are some people that are getting it right, and they're not coming out and they're not being, spastic about it, right? But it is still a major problem. So I would say, word to the wise, be mindful, be objective, demand objectivity, and let's get away from this right versus left paradigm. Let's look at what will create a better society. All right, folks, that's my show. Let's see what we got for some remaining comments here. Let's see here. Nothing on Facebook there. All right, I think that's it. So let me post this up on the screen here really quickly for you guys, and then we will. I'll do my little closing here really quickly. Let's see here. That's not what I wanted. All right, so my VA lady points out, follow Liberty Dad in all the places. You can go to my link tree. It is in the comments. It is in the show notes. I want you to go to that. Check me out and spread the word. Support Liberty Dad. Keep this show thriving. Remember, you can use Liberty Dad for 10% off at blackgunsmatter.shop, or you can use the referral link, which is in the show notes, also in the chat. Thank you, my VA lady, for putting it in the chat. You can click on that link. You can go there. You'll get that discount. You'll support Maz with his work. You'll support the Liberty Dad Show in my work on Rumble. Go ahead and try to hit that green $ button for the rants. I read those on the show, give you much props and thanks. Also connect with me on all the platforms at Linktree. You can find my Patreon and you can find my Buy Me a Coffee. All that goes toward, again, helping this show stay strong, keep them Liberty vibes going. With that, folks, I'm going to bid you farewell, and I will see you tomorrow.